Subhashini.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You are screen sharing. Oh,
Hello, namaste, sir.
namaste, namaste.
Just coming 2 minutes.
Yes, today I'm not able to share. What's the problem? Hello.
Hello, sir.
Is
Good
it
afternoon.
visible? Good afternoon.
Visible, sir.
The screen is
Only
very.
15 participants here, sir.
Yeah.
Empty screen visible, sir.
Is
Zoom
it your
का
empty screen?
Zoom का screen visible, sir.
There is some problem here. Share sound.
Once
Optimize.
again, close and start the program, sir.
Once again, close.
Yes, sir.
Start the.
Now it's okay.
Okay, sir. First
Okay,
slide.
sir.
Welcome.
Okay, sir.
Unit 14.
Yeah,
Possible
unit 14, probability
sampling
sampling techniques.
technique.
Okay.
Visible, sir.
Visible, sir.
Okay, good. Something, is there any strange item that is appearing on the screen other than this? No. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Today we are going to discuss unit number 14, probability sampling.
Okay.
That is a continuation of yesterday's topic also. Yesterday, I think we have discussed the types of probability sampling and non-probability sampling techniques. And now we are going to discuss in detail about all those sampling techniques which will come under probability sampling techniques and non-probability sampling techniques. So whenever you talk about a probability means it's a question of it will happen. It will happen. The meaning of probability is it will happen or happens. So or otherwise of likelihood of the result. Whatever you expect likely to happen, that is known as probability. Whatever you expect that's going to happen is, in other words, we can call it as probability, likelihoodness of the sampling. So this probability means there is a scope for whatever you expect that may happen. Scope for may happen. So likelihoodness of those things will come under this probability sampling techniques. So whatever you think that will happen, most of the cases and that we can call it as probability. It will happen, or otherwise likelihoodness of the experiment. Then probability sampling techniques are those that clearly specify the probability, likelihood of inclusion of each individual in the sample. So there is a scope for each individual to represent the sample. So probability sampling method satisfy the following conditions. Whenever you talk about probability sampling, there are certain conditions to be satisfied. Then only it will become representative. Then only it becomes representative. And those conditions are the size of the parent population. The size of the parent population or inverse. What is the total number of individuals, which we call it as a population. Our total number of objects is also population. Our total number of items, that is also population. But our concern is about the human beings or the people. Therefore, how many people are there in this particular area? That becomes the population or inverse. So the size of the parent population is very important whenever you talk about probability sampling techniques. Then the next condition is each individual must have equal chance for inclusion. So out of 100 people, if you think that the population is 100, and there is every chance of inclusion of each individual, and all those 100 people have the chance of entering the sample. So therefore, there is an equal chance for each individual to be included in the sample. Then only that becomes representative sample. Every individual has the chance. That chance factor will also play a vital role in sampling techniques. And the desired sample size must be clearly specified. And what is the size of your sample you have to specify? Out of 100, you would like to study 10, 20, or 25 like that. What is that you decide to have the size of the sample? So these are the three conditions for probability sampling technique. The first one is what is the total population? Then you should also consider each individual has the chance to enter the sample. And the third condition is, and how much you are going to take as a sample. How much or how many individuals or the people you would like to have in our sample. So that you have decide. So these are the three conditions which are to be satisfied whenever we talk about probability sampling techniques. And again, I should also inform you, my dear friends, whenever we talk about sampling, that's a representative sample. Sampling is normally probability sampling means that's a representative, and the results can be generalized. The results by using this probability sampling techniques can be generalized. So therefore, there is a chance of applying all those results anywhere, because when it is sample, representative sample, then there is a chance for applying all the results. Then only it becomes a probability sampling. Probability sampling. Then advantage of this probability sampling techniques is it's a representative, and what's the generalization? That's what I just now said. When the sample is representative, and automatically when it is representing the population means, so wherever that you are going to want to have this experiment, then you are going to get the same results, and it's what to generalize. So if experiment is conducted here, the results of the experiment can also be used in somewhere in other places also of the population. So it's representative and what the generalization and comparable to populations to which they belong. You can also compare the results from one experiment results to the other experiment results. Then the disadvantage is sampling error. So we cannot say the sample, even though we are trying our level best to ensure that the sample is the right sample, still I think it's very, very difficult whenever you talk about human beings, and then the sample that you have to collect. There, the disadvantage is sampling error, because if the statistics or statics are not able to match with the parameters, then the question of sampling error will arise. Yesterday, there was also discussion what is the parameter and what is the static. Static related to the sample, whereas parameter related to the population. So population mean is a parameter, population standard deviation is a parameter. Then if it constant to the sampling, we can call it as static mean. So static means standard deviation, static standard deviation. So therefore, if there is any gap between the sampling mean and the population mean, that will also be known as the sampling error. The difference between the population mean and the sampling mean will indicate the sampling error. So as far as possible, the smaller the sample size, the higher the small error, sampling error. The smaller the sample, the higher the sampling error. The higher the sample, the lesser the sampling error. So whenever you talk about probability sampling techniques, then small sample lead for sampling errors. So you are supposed to have more number of individuals to be included in your sample then in order to reduce the error. In order to reduce the error means the sampling size should be better or higher one. Otherwise, if the sample size is very less or small sample, that will lead for erroneous results. Then the probability sampling methods. The first one is systematic sampling. Systematic sampling. The practical way of sampling is to select every nth person from the predetermined list of elements or individuals. So systematic sampling means every nth person to be included in the sample. Example, in a class of 60 students, every fifth roll number can be considered for sample. That comes to 12 students would be coming into the sample. Is it right? If there are 6 students in a class, if you consider that every fifth roll number is considered for inclusion in the sample, then how many students are coming into the fold of your sample?
12.
Is it right?
10,
First,
10.
fifth one, 10th one, 15th one, 20th one, 25th one, 30th one. Am I right?
6, sir.
So if there are 60 students and every fifth member in the rolls is considered for inclusion sample means out of 60 you are going to select 12 students and 12 students would be the sample size here in this particular case. So every fifth member will be, or it may be fifth member, or it may be third member. If you want a more number of students, you can also consider every third members will come into the sample means then the number of candidates of the sample would also increase. So here we are considering the fifth member, every fifth member. Therefore, the sample size is about only 12. If you consider every third member of the 60 students, then it may go up.
20
The
students.
sample will go up, isn't it? So
Yeah.
we are getting more number of students into the sample if we consider every third member for inclusion in the sample. So the advantage of this systematic sampling method, normally this is the kind of sampling method that you have to apply whenever you talk about the data collection with regard to the human beings or the people. This is to my knowledge, it has some kind of scientific base. It has scientific base because every fifth member is coming into the fold, and therefore some kind of scientific base is involved in this particular systematic sampling. So the advantage is that it's a quick method of obtaining a sample of elements or individuals, and it's also systematic sample spread more evenly over the entire population. So over the entire population, it is spread. It's spread over the entire population. These are the advantages of this systematic sampling, and is also scientific because it is able to represent, this sample is able to represent the universe. Then the disadvantages are systematic sampling ignores all persons between every nth element chosen. So you are selecting every fifth member in this case. So what about those 4 candidates? 1, 2, 3, 4 roll number candidates. You are just ignoring. Their presence is not felt. That's one of the disadvantages. All the first 4 members are left out. Only the 5th member is considered. Then why is it like that? So this is one of the desert because you are just ignoring those 4 members and the 5th member is coming into the fold. Then from 5th to 10th, again 6th, 8th, 9th, 10th, those roll numbers are also ignored. So there is ignorance of those members. So that is one of the disadvantages. But you are not able to take or consider all those 4 members which are ignored from your sample. So therefore only the 5th member, 10th member, and in between these nth numbers, those members are just ignored, and this is one of the disadvantages. More individuals will be drawn from one group. So from a single group, more individuals can also be drawn. Then such a type of bias may also when the list is alphabet, and there is also bias. Bias because if you arrange all those candidates on the base of the alphabetics, A candidate should come first, next B candidate or C candidate like this. If you can organize all those candidates on the base of the alphabets, and there may also be some kind of bias also. And also possibility of other errors because at times it may not be represented to us because the population is having so many segments or so many groups or status. So if it doesn't represent all the nth members may not represent at times. I cannot say at times, although the nth members which are included in the sample may not represent all the segments of the status of the population. There is a possibility that some of the status or the sections may be deleted or may be ignored also. So this is also one of the disadvantages of this particular systematic sampling, but slightly better than random sampling technique. So this is slightly better than random sampling technique because it has some kind of, we are following some kind of rule, some kind of logic. That logic is selecting every 5th member or 10th member or 15th member on the basis of the population. So that is all about this probability sampling, this systematic sampling technique. And now let us move on to the next one is random sampling technique. Random sampling technique is known as unrestricted random sampling in which every item of the universe has an equal chance for inclusion in the sample. So out of 100 population, then every member has the chance to enter the sampling structure. So that kind of chance, equal chance of entering into the sample structure is the quality of this random sampling technique. So selection of the random sample is based, you can consider these 3 methods, how to select this random sampling. For that purpose, the first one is fishbowl draw method. Fishbowl draw method. That means lottery type. You can put all the numbers of that 100 members in a bowl. We can call it as fish bowl. Then the numbering is given and all the chits are put in the bowl. Then you can pick out. You can pick out the number you require. Out of 100, if you want to 20 candidates, then you can pick out 20 chits. That is one way of selecting the random sample method. It is completely lottery type, like the jobs in the United States of America, because there will be some lottery kind of thing. Whoever is picked up, they will continue in the job. Otherwise, the rest of the members have to leave the organization. Similarly is the case here. Fishbowl draw method, which means all the 100 candidates, the population have to be listed out, and you can have 100 chits. The numbers would be there. So, and from that, if you want 20 members to be selected, then you can pick out 20 chits. That 20 is the sampling, which is done on the base of randomization. So that is fish bowl draw method. It's a bowl. You can put all the chits of 100 members. Then you pick out the desired number. That desired number, if you want 20, you can pick out 20 chits. If you want 25, you can also pick out 25 chits. And those 20 or 25 chits, candidates, they would be coming into the fold of sample from which you are going to collect the data. Using table of random numbers And the other method for selecting the random sample is using table of random numbers. Already the great statisticians such as Tippett, Yates, Fisher have prepared random tables which can be used for selecting the sample. So these people have already prepared random sample tables. From that, you can pick out the number of candidates you require for your study. Tippett is one statistician who has prepared this tables, random number tables. Similarly, Yates also prepared random number tables, and Fisher also prepared random number tables. You can use any one of these things for choosing the sample for this random sampling technique. So you can also choose the number of candidates that you require for your study by using Tippett table or Yates table or Fisher random numbers table. So these are the great statistics. We have already done this kind of exercise. Only thing you have to do is you have to open the tables, and then the minimum number is which, the maximum number is what. You have to decide the minimum number and the maximum number between that. What kind of, of course, the individuals that you have to come, you have to number of candidates you require, you have to select. What is the minimum number and the maximum number you have to decide. In between these two minimum and maximum numbers, the number of candidates you require, that you have to choose number of candidates from that particular table. The method, next one is the method of computer determined randomness. And nowadays, computers are playing a vital role as far as the research is concerned, because we're using the computers for analysis of the data, and so many applications, statistical applications can be done using this computer assistance. Therefore, it's very easy for any candidate who have any problem with regard to selection of the sampling. Then they go to contact the computer operator. How many candidates you require for study means he will arrange that kind of program, and then he will give the number of candidates from which you have to collect the data using this computer determined, we can call it as computer determined randomness. So with the help of the assistance of the computer will give us, it will answer the kind of candidates that you require for your study. If you can tell them this, if you can tell the operator, if you do not have any idea about that, with regard to using the computer's applications, then if you can approach the computer operator or the person who has idea how to pick out this random samples, he will help you to pick out the sampling candidates to be included for your study with the help of this computer determined randomness. So out of these three methods, people say that the second one is better one. Using table of random numbers is the better one, because already Tippett, Yates, and Fisherman, they are the great statisticians who have done meticulous work, very serious work for years together. Then they have prepared the random number tables, and using those random number tables, then picking out the candidates or the individuals or the people you want. Then that was the best way of selecting the random sampling. So the second one is the best way of using the random sampling. The tables which are available in the Department of Statistics, in the Department of Education, may be available in the Department of your Psychology also. These tables are available, to my knowledge, in most of the departments which are using this kind of random sampling technique. So for this purpose, you have to use the table of random numbers, and which are prepared by Tippett, Yates, and Fisher, and that is one of the best methods one can follow for picking out the sample. Next one is stratified random sampling technique. We have seen so far systematic random sampling technique. The second one is random sampling technique. And the third one is stratified random sampling technique. And all these techniques we are trying to discuss under probability sampling techniques. Probability sampling techniques means which are the sample is representative and the results would be generalized. So whenever you talk about probability sampling techniques, the qualities of these probability sampling techniques are that they are representative samples. You can apply the results to all the individuals or in all the areas of that particular population, or otherwise you can generalize generalize the results. So number one is representative sample. Number two is you can generalize the results. So these are the two qualities of probability sampling techniques. Then stratified random sampling technique is not a homogeneous group. The title itself indicates stratified, or otherwise it's a classified. Classified is not a homogeneous group, it's a heterogeneity. It has heterogeneity because the societies, you find so much of stratification on the basis of caste, on the basis of religion, on the basis of, language, on the basis of a location like this. The society is divided. It is classified, urban, rural, and the base of occupation also, on the base of literacy levels also, on the base of SES, socio-economic status, like this, and rich and poor. I think we, of course, as researchers, we know pretty well the society is not a homogeneous one. It is a heterogeneous society, especially ours. India is a heterogeneous kind of country where you find so many groups, so many sections, so many status. So when the society is stratified, then we have to collect the data from all the status. Then only it would be representative. From all the sections, you have to divide the society into sections. From each section, you have to collect the data. Then only that would be representative. So if you are collecting the data from the different sections of the society or the population, then we can call it as stratified random sampling technique. Stratified random sampling means stratification means classification, or it is divided, classified, divided, or categorized. So on the basis of the categorization of this population, then you have to collect the sample from all categories, then only it becomes a representative one. So this is one of the best methods to my knowledge, and most of the research will be using this kind of method because the whole society is divided into different status. So when the status are there, if you are leaving the status, means that is not a representative sample. So you are collecting the data from each strata. That kind of sampling is known as stratified random sampling technique. So for the stratified population has to be divided into several status, and from each strata you have to select the candidates or the persons randomly. You are selecting the candidates or the persons randomly from each strata. So therefore, that kind of sampling technique is known as stratified random sampling technique. Again, it is of two types. The first one is proportionate stratified random sampling technique. Proportionate stratified random sampling technique. It increases the representativeness. Sampling error can be minimized. That is the advantage of this. So proportionate stratified random sampling means it increases the representativeness. Say for example, if there are, I think example in our study material, there is also an example which is given here. So the example is like, for example, two or more status. Yeah. If you want to collect the data from each strata, you fix 10% of each strata, 10% of the persons can be considered to collect the data from each strata. That 10% will spread. That is applicable to all the status. Even it is a big strata, the population of that strata may be more. Accordingly, you have to collect the data from 10% of that big state also. If the population in one state is very less, in that also, you have to consider 10% of the population for selecting them to the sampling. So therefore, this 10% or 5%, whatever that you are desired to collect the data, that is from each state, you have to consider the collection of the data or the selection of the candidates for your sample. That you have to do, whether it's 5% or 3%. If it is huge population, if it is in lakhs, then automatically I think 5% will come to maybe 20,000 or something like this, isn't it? So I think on the basis, so whatever the sample that you require, number of candidates to be included for your sampling means whether it may be 3% or 4% or 5%, that you have to decide, which is desirable by the experimenter. On the basis of that, from each data, you have to collect that data from those data. It may be 3%, whichever you feel right, or 4% or 5% or 10% also. So therefore, that kind of proportionately you are collecting the, I am sorry, selecting the candidates. Proportionately you are selecting the candidates from each data. And the limitation of this method is, the method assumes that the researcher knows the composition and distribution of population well before the actual sampling starts. Even before sampling starts, he knows pretty well about the total population, the composition and the distribution of population. The method assumes that the researcher knows the composition and the distribution of population well before the actual sampling starts. This is one of the limitations. Next one is disproportionate random sampling technique. Disproportionate. So earlier we have seen proportionate, equal. From each data we are collecting the data as desired by the experimenter, and the disproportionate stratified random sampling means is not proportionate. In one data you may be collecting 5% of the candidate. In some other data you may be collecting 2%. In some other data you may be collecting 5, 6% or 7% like that, because that is not proportionately considered for selecting the candidates. So when these candidates for your sample is not considered proportionately, then it becomes disproportionate stratified random sampling technique. At times, the researcher feels, and from this particular data, we need to select more number of candidates. If one data, of course, where the population is very high, if you want to select more number of candidates from that particular data and less number of candidates from another data, that becomes the disproportionate stratified random sampling technique, because it is not proportionately done. The sampling is not proportionately done, but in some data it is very high, in some data it is very less. So such a kind of disproportionate stratified random sampling technique can also be employed by the researcher if it is essential, that too based on the situation. Based on the situation, if the candidates are not available in that data because they may be missing out, or it may be too far at times, may not be possible. In such a case, what he does is, or she does is, from one data, more number of candidates will be selected by that way. In other data, the number would be very less. So this kind of disproportionate stratified random sampling technique is based on the situation also. In the situation demands, if you want to select more number of candidates from one data, that you can also do it, but that is not proportionately done. That becomes disproportionate stratified random sampling technique. So most of the cases, what we do is, it's better if you always follow this proportionate stratified random sampling technique. Proportionate in all the status. If you fix 5% from me, whether it is less or it is high populated areas, but you are considering that 5% in all the status for selecting the persons. So always better to have this kind of proportionate stratified random sampling. But if it is so demand, the need is necessary, means if it is necessary or essential, you can also use this disproportionate stratified random sampling if the situation demands. On the basis of the situation, then you can also include the sample from one data more and one data less. That becomes a disproportionate stratified random sampling technique. Now we are moving into cluster sampling. So far we have seen systematic random sampling, then also random sampling. We have also seen this stratified random sampling technique. Now we are moving into cluster sampling. You know pretty well about the cluster areas. And education, those people who are in the education, they also know that some of the schools which are very near, they will be called as cluster schools. They will be cooperative schools, cooperating with each other or with one another. So all those nearby schools will come to a particular place. for various purposes. So I think similarly villages can also be, some villages can be called, and all these three villages will be one cluster. You have to divide those areas into clusters. So
Industry
from each
clusters,
cluster,
yeah,
you
as
can
you,
collect the data.
that's right.
Hello?
Industry cluster also is becoming very famous.
Yeah, very good. Very sorry. Is there any आपका voice? I'm not able to get the voice. Please,
I
could you
have
please
become
raise the volume?
me.
Yeah, yourself, sir.
Achha, I
Yeah,
can
am I
raise.
audible?
No, you are perfectly.
Yeah, but so there is a low voice from your side.
Oh,
Could you please increase the volume of that?
I see.
Or
Sure,
very
sir.
near to the mic also.
Thank you, sir.
Anyway, it's all right. It may be industries or it may be, of course, even for political or areas for the benefits which are coming from the government. They used to have this cluster villages. So some of the villages will be covered, which we can call it as a cluster villages. Similarly, in education side, we can have the cluster schools. Divide the area into clusters, and from each cluster, you have to select the sample randomly. So cluster sampling can be utilized when large-scale surveys of political, religious, and social behavior are easily conducted. So in cluster sampling, the population is divided into clusters, typically based on geographical location or another, maybe based on geographical location, the clusters will be formed. Then researchers randomly select entire clusters. They either study all the clusters or they may be following the selection of the candidates by using randomization. So the cluster schools or the cluster villages, from those clusters you have to select the candidates. Then the whole cluster members, which is also impossible, but you have to go using the randomization. By using randomization, the persons would be selected from those clusters. So the geographical areas, or the areas divided into certain geographical areas, and three or four villages would come as a cluster. So from each cluster, you have to include those or select the candidates by using randomization. Otherwise, I think it would also be very difficult to include all those candidates of all the cluster villages. So therefore, use this randomization, that would be better, so that it will be easy for you for analysis purposes or collecting the data. If you want to collect the data from all the candidates or from each cluster, that would be a Herculean task. So therefore, try to use randomization while selecting the candidates from the cluster villages or the cluster areas. So this is the best method when the specified individuals are inaccessible or unobtainable. This is one of the best method when the specified individuals are inaccessible. When the individuals are not accessible, then the alternative sampling technique is the cluster sampling. From cluster sampling, then even the specified candidate is not available, then the other candidate will be selected. That is one of the, of course, merit of this. One of the advantages of this method is, if the candidates are inaccessible, which are specified, if they're not available, then you can go for collecting the data from the other individuals. So we will be coming into the picture of your sampling. So public opinion polls can be conducted smoothly using cluster sampling. All your surveys, the exit polls, or otherwise your entry polls, all those polls, election polls, they will be following this kind of method. Cluster sampling. Public opinion polls can be conducted smoothly using this cluster sampling. The example is, a researcher wants to study the educational outcomes in a large city. Divide the city into school districts. School districts. Randomly select several districts, survey all, and from them, within those district clusters, you have to collect the data using randomization. So therefore, the researchers want to study educational outcomes in a large city. Divide the city into school districts. Randomly select several districts. Survey all. Is, I think there is some kind of problem is there. Yes. So I think you have to divide the whole, yes, just now you have to divide all those schools, or otherwise you have to club those schools. 3 or 4 schools will be coming as a cluster schools. From each cluster, you have to collect the data randomly. That becomes the cluster sampling. Under most of the cases, this kind of sampling technique is used with regard to public opinions. For collecting the public opinion with regard to any kind of issue, then this is the best method to be adopted by the researchers. Then area sampling, this is also very close to this cluster sampling. Just now we have also seen on the base of the geography of the areas, we have seen the formation of the clusters. And this is also another cluster sampling technique, which follows very closely with that of the cluster sampling. We can also call it as, even though the title area sampling is something new, but it is also a cluster sampling technique, or otherwise, we can also call it as a geographical cluster sampling. Geographical cluster sampling, because the area is divided on the geography. On the geography of the area is divided on the geographical factors. So those clusters are followed on the age of geography. We will call it as geographical cluster sampling, who are very similar. The villages which are very similar will be clubbed. That is a cluster. Similarly, on the base of the geography, then we can have the villages. We can call them as geographical cluster sampling. So geographical area may be divided into districts, housing blocks, and townships also. So geographical area may be divided into districts, then housing blocks, and townships. So this kind of classification, we can also divide that area into districts. And then of course we have districts from to revenue divisions, from revenue divisions to mandals, and mandals to panchayats, and panchayats to hamlets. So if you can club 3 or 4 panchayats, if they're very small, then that becomes a cluster panchayat. Cluster panchayat. So this kind of area is divided on the base of these structures. So we can call it as a cluster sampling. This is very close to, even though the title is something different, area sampling, but it is altogether a cluster sampling kind of thing. But only in the case, the difference is that you cannot see the difference, but the geography of those areas is considered here for the purpose of area sampling. So area sampling considers the geographical factors, and that is, of course, something different from that of the cluster sampling. The starting, for example, if you want to start an outlet, then what we have to do is, with regard to this area sampling, first the geographic area, you have to see this geographic area, then subdivisions of that area have to be determined. Each subdivision cluster should be highly similar to all others. So all these subdivision clusters are almost equal in many matters. In many matters, they are equal, all these subdivision clusters. So we have seen the geographic area, and we have seen the subdivisions, and all these subdivisions become the cluster, and each cluster almost have the similar characteristics or similar parameters. So we can call it as subdivision cluster. Subdivision clusters. The area is divided into subdivisions, and 3 or 4 subdivisions would become the cluster, which we can call it as subdivision cluster. Choose 10 housing blocks within 2 kilometers of proposed site for example, if you want to start an outlet for that purpose, what the businessman has to do is choose 10 housing blocks within 2 kilometers of the proposed site for the new retail outlet, and using random table list the housing blocks and later select the households. Normally, if you want to establish a shop, if you want to start a shop or some kind of starting an outlet, so within 2 kilometers radius, consider 10 housing blocks for the new retail outlet, and using random table list the housing blocks and later select the households. Then you decide the number of housing blocks based on the random table, and then from each housing block the households have to be determined. So from this, so for the retail shop, for the retail shop, establishment of the retails of the example, for this example, then how many housing blocks are there in a radius of 2 kilometers? Then you list out them, follow the random table. Then how many blocks you have to consider? from each block, how many households have to be considered? How many households have to be considered for collecting the data? So I think this kind of exercise normally the business people will be doing for establishing an outlet. So I think they will collect the data with regard to the provision needs of the people. What is required for the people? That kind of data will be collected from those households, Then, and those households will be considered from the housing blocks. From the housing blocks, then you have to select the households. From each household, you have to collect the data, what is required for the people. So on the base of the data that you experimenter or the researcher collected, then they will put all those things or items in that particular shop. So that is one kind of example that we can also use for this area sampling. Normally, this can be done by the business people. You can also use it for a area, even for educational purposes or for our own surveys. You can also use this kind of sampling, area sampling. From this area, we can collect the data on the base of the geographical indicators. So if you want to collect the data with regard to any kind of, opinion to be collected from the people, if you want to collect the opinion from the people, you can also use this area sampling technique because it closely follows the cluster sampling technique. Then the multi-stage sampling. Multi-stage sampling is a complex form of cluster sampling that involves multiple stages random selection. It is especially useful for large and geographically dispersed population. If your study is a bigger one, a country kind of, say a country study, that means which covers complete the country. If you want to study the country with regard to certain aspect, if you consider it becomes a country kind of study means if the area is very big, the data has to be gathered. It's very large. So therefore, in that circumstances, we're going to use multi-stage sampling technique. Multi-stage sampling technique. Multi means many. At many stages, you have to follow the sampling procedure. Otherwise, you will dip in the problems. You're caught up with a problem. If you don't use this multi-stage sampling technique for the bigger study, which covers the whole country, because you cannot study or gather the data from all the people, or 147 or 148 or 150 crore population, you cannot collect the data. In the circumstance of the context, what the researcher has to do is, he has to use this multi-stage sampling technique. Example is, in a national health survey, researchers first divide the country into regions, then randomly select. That's the first sampling. The first stage sample is in a national health survey because they are collecting the data with regard to health issues. This is a national health survey. That means they are covering the whole nation. So they are collecting the data from the people of that particular country. So in that cases, what the experiment has to do is, they first divide the country into regions. So you have to divide the country into regions. We have many regions in India also. You have divided those regions. That is the first stage. Then randomly select cities within each region. Second stage is select cities within each region. From each region, you have to collect the cities which needs to be considered for your sampling. That is the stage 2. Then selecting, what the next one is? The other one, yeah. Cities, from each city, you have to collect. Stage 3 is then select, what is the households, I think, yeah. Individuals, each household, yeah. You have to consider households from each city. That is the third stage.
City,
The final survey individuals within household, yes. The fourth stage is from each household. How many people are to be selected for your sample? So from the country, you have come to the regions, that's the first stage. From the regions to the cities, second stage. From cities to the households, that's the third stage. From household to individuals. That is the fourth stage. How many individuals will be contacted for the survey on national health? Am I right? Is it okay, friends?
Very right. Very right.
Okay, sir.
Everywhere there is a filter. Filter is there. You cannot, if you don't follow this, it would be very difficult for you. The country has to be divided into regions, the regions divided into cities, cities divided into households, and households are to be considered how many people from each household to be
Individual.
contacted or selected for your sample. There are 4 stages, and finally, those individuals from each household would be your sample, final sample. And from those people only, you are collecting the data related to national health with regard to the health issues of the people. This is the National Health Survey. So the country kind of study for which you are supposed to adopt or follow this multi-stage sampling technique. And finally, the individuals which are selected from each household will be forming your multi-stage sampling. Then from them only you are collecting the data. The advantage of this particular multi-stage sampling is more advantageous than single-stage designs. A large sample can be sampled for a given cost. A large samples can be sampled for a given cost. Convenience of finding the survey sample, convenience factor, it would also be convenient to collect the data using this multi-stage sampling technique when the study covers the bigger area. If you want to study your study, the scope of your study is very large, then what you have to do is you have to follow this multi-stage sampling technique. If not the country, you can also consider the state. That is also for which you have to use this multi-stage sampling. The states are divided into districts, districts are divided into mandals, mandals are divided into gram panchayats, and gram panchayats are divided into households. Is it okay, friends, now? And from each household, how many individuals have to be included in the sample? That we have to decide. That is also multi-stage sampling technique. And sample size is the same, but there is disadvantage of this also. But every sampling technique has advantages and disadvantages. And there would also be sampling error with all these techniques, because when you are collecting the data from the human beings from the different areas, and that to multicultural settings, multicultural settings. Our India is something different. It's a very typical. And you're supposed to have the sampling error. So like this, multi-stage sampling has advantages as well as disadvantages. And the cooperation coming from the people or for doing this kind of national survey, I think you have to get they elicit the cooperation of the people of different countries, different cities. That would, if they support, then only it would be possible. Otherwise, as a single individual, it would be very difficult task. Then that's all about probability sampling techniques. So, my dear friends, so far we have seen under probability sampling techniques, the first one is systematic sampling technique. The second one is random sampling technique. The third one is stratified random sampling technique. The fourth one is cluster sampling technique. The fifth one is area sampling
Area
technique.
sample.
The sixth one is multi-stage random sampling technique. And you have to decide which kind of sample technique is appropriate for your study if you are doing research. Am I right, sir? Out of all these, because I'm throwing information related to various sampling techniques which will come under probability sampling. So out of all these techniques, which kind of, which sample technique is appropriate or suitable for your study, that you have to decide. And most of the cases, what we're doing is we are following stratified random sampling technique. Or otherwise, you can also mix it up, all the sampling techniques too, in case your study demands, because for us is the result is very important. Validity of the data is very important. So if single sampling technique is not possible, will not give the valid results, you can also mix up the other sampling techniques in order to get the valid data from the people. After all, we are doing all these kind of research for getting valid data and also reliable data. If you want to get the reliable and valid data, you can also mix up these sampling techniques. So if one is not able to give the reliable or valid data, one sampling technique is not giving the reliable data, means you can also use some other method or mix up another method so that you can get valid data, and that would be very, very important for getting better results out of your research study. That's all about probability sampling techniques, probable sampling techniques. This is okay, friends?
Yes, sir.
Am I
Okay,
clear?
sir. Yes, sir.
Now shall we move into this non-probable sampling techniques?
Sure, sure.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
right? So
Okay, sir.
non-probability sampling techniques, unit number 15. Unit number 15 is devoted for discussion of non-probability sampling techniques. This nomenclature itself states your sampling technique is not generalized one. You cannot generalize. This non-probability sampling technique, it states your results will not be generalized. And those results are applicable to a specific group from which the data is collected. If the data is collected from one situation, and the results will be applicable only to that situation, and you cannot generalize those results to other pockets, other status, other sections, whichever from which area or from which section you collect the data, and the results would be applicable only to that data or to that section or to those individuals of that particular section. So therefore, the question of randomization doesn't appear here, doesn't consider here. Representativeness is also very less. It cannot be a representative sample of the population, but it may be representative to that particular section, not the total population. To particular section, it may be representative, but it is not representing the total universe. So therefore, the results will be applicable only to those areas in which the study is conducted. And you can apply those results only for that area. You cannot use or apply those results of your study to the other areas where you have not conducted the experiment, like that of the probable sampling techniques, because there the randomization is there, their representativeness is there, their generalization is there. But here you cannot generalize. It's only particular specific group is considered for this non-probability sampling techniques. So non-probability sampling involves selecting participants without randomization. There, in the probability sampling technique, the randomization was compulsory, and by that way, generalization was possible. Here, this cannot be generalized. Instead, an accessibility, judgment, or predefined criteria, you can select the participants. Predetermined, already decided. You are determined to collect the data from X, Y, Z. And those people who are accessible to you, from them only you are collecting the data. It is commonly used in qualitative researches, pilot studies, or situations where the population is hard to define or access. If you are not able to define the population, not able to know the population size, there you are going to use this kind of non-probability sampling techniques, where there is no randomization, where there is no representativeness, where there is no generalization of the results. Normally, this kind of techniques will be used in the pilot studies or situations where the population is hard to define or access. This sampling technique, in which samples are selected, random, non-random criteria, often influenced by the researcher's judgment or convenience. So based on the convenience, based on the judgment of the researcher, you will be collecting or you will be selecting the candidates or the participants. You are selecting the participants on the basis of the judgment of the researcher. He decides. It may be on the basis of convenience or it may be on the basis of some kind of judgment how to collect the data from these people only. So where every member of the population has a known and equal of being selected. So from that area in which he is going to select the candidates, you may be knowing pretty well about that area because it's a predetermined task. Non-probability sampling does not guarantee equal representativeness. It is less generalizable but often more practical for exploratory research. Exploratory research for exploration. But generalization, representativeness may not be there with regard to this non-probability sampling techniques. And the key points, non-randomization, subjectivity would be there, quick and cost-effective, limited generalizations. These are the key points of non-probability sampling techniques. Non-random selection, the selection of the participants are done not randomly, and there would be subjectivity, which unknown factors would enter into the sampling. Quick and cost effective, because this is accessible and whoever is very close to you, very accessible, then only you are collecting the data from them or you are selecting such kind of candidates or participants who are very easily available. That way, often fast and more affordable than probability sampling techniques and limited generalization. Hello, ఎవరు మాట్లాడుతున్నారు అక్కడ? Who is talking? Hello.
శ్రీదేవి మేడం, శ్రీదేవి మేడం ఇది మ్యూట్ చేయండి.
Hello, madam.
శ్రీదేవి మేడం మీరు మ్యూట్ చేయండి.
Very nice, very nice. Hello, there is a conversation between mother and daughter.
శ్రీదేవి మేడం, శ్రీదేవి మేడం, శ్రీదేవి మేడం మ్యూట్ చేయండి.
Yes, well, friends. So these are the qualities of the key points of non-probability sampling technique. This quite opposite to that of the probability sampling techniques. Then under non-probability sampling techniques, and what are the various sampling techniques? Now let us try to understand what are they. The first one is convenience sampling. Convenience sampling to the researcher. So selecting the participants who are easiest to reach or readily available. It may called as incidental sampling method also. There is some kind of, mistake is there. METH word. There is some mistake in that. Please rectify that one. So this convenience sampling means you are choosing those candidates who are readily available or easily accessible, who can be reached easily. That means you are selecting such kind of candidates for your sample who are readily available and easily to be reached for them for data collection. So therefore, conveniently you are doing your research. For that purpose, you are using this kind of convenience sampling. Whoever is ready, whoever is very near, whoever is accessible, whoever is known to you. These are the various qualities of this convenience sampling. So therefore, if you are including such a kind of candidates for your sample, then that can be called as convenience. In other words, we can call it as incidental sampling method or accidental sampling method. We can also call it as incidental. Incidentally, if anybody comes to you, then you will be doing research. If he is okay for your research, you can collect the data. Isn't it? Incidental sampling. Whoever comes to you, whoever is easily available, who is easily approachable, accessible, from them only you are collecting the data and you are including those candidates who are readily available. Then that becomes the convenience sampling. Conveniently, without going out, without putting so much of money. But this is not the good method, my dear friends. This is not the method at all. Only it will give some kind of inference, but mostly most of the results, you may not get the valid results out of this convenience sampling. It should be always representative sample. There's a better method because probable sampling techniques are the better sampling techniques than this non-probable sampling techniques. But if you want to get immediate results, if you want to understand what the situation is all about, means so these kind of things, these kind of sampling techniques can be used. Convenient sampling, but you cannot use all these results to the other areas. Suitable for exploratory research or pilot studies where time and resources are limited. This kind of convenient sampling can be used for exploratory research. What is happening in this area? If you want to know what is happening in this area, immediately you can take up. You can explore. For that purpose, you can use this convenient sampling. Or pilot studies. Before conducting the actual study, there will be some kind of pilot studies for understanding what is happening, what the people are about. If you want to know of the people, then you can call it as a pilot study. How is this area? How the people are there? This is a kind of window. It's a kind of window shopping. It's a kind of window shopping. Actual shopping comes later. Before that, if you want to know the area, if you want to get some kind of knowledge about the area and the people, then you can collect this pilot studies for which the convenience sample is the suitable method. Examples, surveying shoppers in a mall. Surveying shoppers in a mall. So who are those shoppers in a mall? For that purpose, you can use this sampling. Collecting data from colleagues in the workplace. And those people who are working in this particular project or particular organization or office, you can collect the data from your colleagues because they're accessible and they're readily available. Similarly, surveying shoppers in a mall means in a mall, how many shops are there and who are they? If you want to collect the data, such kind of survey data, you can use this convenience sampling. The second one is purposive sampling. Purposive sampling means specific purpose. If we want to know, I think I've also given many examples during your offline classes. This was also discussed, and most of the sampling techniques that we are discussing today were also discussed in the offline classes. But it's only elaborative explanation of those sampling techniques which we discussed during our offline classes. So next one is purposive sampling means for that purpose. Say for example, how is the teaching of Dr. B. Krishna Reddy? You want to know the effectiveness of Dr. B. Krishna Reddy's class. Teaching effectiveness of Dr. B. Krishna Reddy with regard to psychology subject, that to research methodology. Is his teaching effective? Is it effective? Then if you want to know that, how effective it is, I have to collect the data from those people who are exposed to my class. Malishetty garu,
అవునండి.
Manohar Elishetty garu.
అవునవును.
The best example is if you want to test my efficacy or effectiveness of my class,
Yes.
you are the person who has to judge,
Yeah.
not the people who are not exposed to my lecturing, to my class, to my teaching. So here there is a purpose behind this, isn't it?
Yes.
For that purpose only, those people who are really actually experienced, you have to include such a kind of experienced or exposed people to that particular class. That's one of the examples. Used when targeted a specific subgroup of the population. So selecting participants based on specific characteristics or criteria relevant to the study. I have also given my own example how effective the teaching of Dr. B. Krishna Reddy. So if you want to know the effectiveness of Dr. B. Krishna Reddy, and the target group is only the students who are exposed to my teaching. I have to collect the data from my students with
Alright.
regard to my teaching effectiveness by using some kind of scale. You have to develop the scale for measuring the effectiveness. That tool has to be administered to the students. Then they will give their opinion or perceptions. They give their perceptions how Dr. Reddy's class is all about, is effective or ineffective. If I get the results, his class is boring, his class is not good, his class is not effective, and immediately the task of the management is he should be deleted hereafter as resource person. Am I right? Hello.
One method, otherwise give chance to improve.
Yeah. No question of chancing improvement here in this Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, because they may also be connected the data from the people. I know pretty well the management of this Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University is also collecting the data with regard to the effectiveness of the resource persons.
We would
Then
like
only
to
they will
see,
continue. Otherwise,
we
they
would
will
like to see such data if available and shareable.
say bid goodbye to that sir also. So this is one of the examples that we can throw. Okay, now if you give the feedback, his teaching is marvelous, excellent, wow. Then there would be jealousy also, the other side. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
So this is one of the best examples for purposive sampling. So therefore, there should be a purpose behind that particular study, and you have to collect the data from those people who are actually experienced. Then only they will give their judgment. We can also call it as judgmental sampling. We can also call it as judgmental sampling because they are judging the effectiveness of my teaching. Okay, now?
Okay, sir.
Now let us move to the next one, snowball sampling. Snowball sampling. This is one of the sampling techniques that we can use it. So this is initial participant recruit others from their network, creating snowball effect. This snowball effect means already in our study material, there is also example given. Snowball technique means there are friends, and these friends may be having another friends, and those people may be having some more friends. This becomes social pattern. Am I right? Social pattern through known network of people is possible to this snowball sampling technique. That means if I know, I may be, for example, you take myself as example, I have my friends, and those friends may be having some other friends of their own, and this will go, isn't it? So that becomes a social pattern. Normally, this kind of snowball sampling technique will be used by business people. If I know Krishna Reddy, through Krishna Reddy, I may be getting orders from 200 people because he is connected with 200 persons. He will tell them, oh, this particular shop is very good. You can go there for purchases. Like this will go to the last person. That means the connectivity, the link from one person to another person, that becomes the social pattern. And people who are in the business would like to see such kind of social patterns for making business. So if I make friendship with Krishna Reddy, automatically friends of Krishna Reddy and friends of so-and-so, so XYZ, who are linked to this Krishna Reddy, one way or other, they would be coming to the shop for purchases, because that is rolling. Snowball means it is rolling from one person to another person to still another person. There is a connectivity. So such kind of sampling can be used by the business people, those people who try to establish certain business firms. Useful for
use for network marketing.
Yeah, that's good. Very nice. That's what I'm talking. So network marketing is a question of relationships, networking. So that will be used for making business, isn't it?
That's right.
So network will be used for making business, and this kind of snowball sampling will be used, especially with regard to business magnets. Useful for hard to reach or hidden populations. So those people, if you are not able to reach the last person, if you know Krishna Reddy will give information about his own friends also. In those cases, if you want to get information from the other people who are connected to Krishna Reddy, it's better. Krishna Reddy will give the information about all those people also who are not able to be reached. Examples, researching drug users through peer reference. Researching drug users through peer referrals. Studying undocumented immigrants via community connections. These are the examples of this snowball sampling. So it's this question of networking, and from the network, you can select the candidates for getting the data from them with regard to the things that you would like to study. Next, quota sampling. Quota means, you know pretty well about the quota sampling.
Yeah.
Reservations. How much reservation for A category, B category, C category. So that will come here. Setting quotas for specific subgroups and selecting participants until quotas are met. So the area is, for example, our reservation category, if you want to make admissions to the engineering stream or any stream. So therefore, OC this much, BC this much quota is allotted to BCs, this much quota is allotted to SCs, this much quota is allotted to STs. Like this, the quota. So from that quota, you have to select the candidates. Using that quotas, you have to select the candidates for getting the data from them. So here the representation of certain characteristics without randomization. So there would not be any randomization here. And the only thing is, from each quota I have to get the data. The example is, that better example is our own the jobs criteria, where the reservation policy is applicable. Similarly, admission criteria into the education institutions, where you find this category 3%, this category 6%, this category 15%. So such kind of quota from those people, from those sections, from those groups, because it is divided like that. So like this, this kind of quota sampling can be applied from those subsections of the society for which you are going to use this quota sampling. From each quota, you can select the candidates. Then judgmental sampling, we have also seen this. Judgmental means purposive sampling. Judgmental sampling is a purposive sampling. It is not different from that of the purposive sampling, where the participants will be acting as judges. Participants will be acting as judges. The example already I have given my own example. Next is voluntary response sampling, which is not included in our syllabus. This is not voluntary response sampling. Anyway, for the sake of knowledge purpose, participants self-select or volunteer to be part of the study. Participants will come forward. I will be the volunteer for this. I can serve you for your research purposes. So if anybody coming voluntarily, we can call it as volunteer to be part of the study. In other words, voluntary response sampling. Participants self-selection. They select themselves to be participants of the study. So if this is done, if they come forward on their own, if they want to give their data, if they can also come into this particular study, join the study and give their opinions. And of course, this is not included in our syllabus. The last is referral sampling. Referral sampling, which is very close to snowball sampling. I think you might have seen nowadays, if you are making an application to a job in the university, immediately that demands referral person who should be contacted to know about you. As soon as you submit online, immediately you will be getting. So somebody has applied for this, and what are your views with regard to this boy? He is the referred person. X is making an application to a job, to the university position. As soon as he submits the application online, and immediately the person he has mentioned in his application, he will be getting information asking what is your remarks or the comments with regard to this person on the different issues that are laid down. How is his communication? How is his ability? How is his research experience? How is his teaching effectiveness? And all these things would be there in that particular format. That format will be coming as soon as the candidates who has applied for the position. So this is online arrangement to a person who is referred to. That reference has to be given by the candidate who is making an application for the position. So the person who is referred, is getting that kind of information, and his comments about this candidate on different issues, that would be given by the person, referred person. So references, especially this kind of sampling would be used sex workers population with regard to STDs, sexually transmitted disease, sensitive issues. If there are any sensitive issues, maybe sex workers, AIDS patients, or people suffering with sexually transmitted diseases, they cannot reveal all those things because they're very sensitive issues from special groups. So for that purpose, if you want to get information from them, the person who is referred, who is known to those people who are having this kind of diseases, sexually transmitted diseases or AIDS or any other sensitive issues, that information has to be collected from the referred person. So for this, the best advantage of collecting data on sensitive issues from special groups. Apart from advantage, there are also disadvantages. The researcher has no systematic plan in selecting the sample. The researcher completely depends on the availability of the sample only, because those people will not come out. They will not disclose themselves. They will not reveal. I've seen many people who are having this AIDS. They themselves do not know that they have AIDS unless that has come to a peak level. ఆ లోపల మొత్తం సముద్రం మునిగిపోయి ఉంటుంది. ఆయనకు ఎయిడ్స్ ఉందన్న విషయం ఆయనకే తెలియదు. There are certain cases where they do not know themselves about that he is affected with AIDS unless he comes to some kind of testing and then disclose that he is the AIDS patient. Before that, he may also kill so many people, isn't it? So therefore here, the referral person will be playing a vital role with regard to those people who are having the sensitive issues. The example is sex workers may not come out. Similarly, patients who are suffering with AIDS may not come out. And similarly, the persons who are having this sexually transmitted diseases, they will not come out and then they will not give the details. So what they do is, the person who know about all these things, and they will be contacted. So we can call them as referred persons. These referred persons will give the information about those people who are suffering with all these ailments. So if we can collect the data from them with regard to the sensitive issues, and for that, this particular referral sampling methods will be applied. Hi, this is all about for today's class, and there are about 4 minutes to, of course, go for this 4:30. Then now, if there are any questions from your side, you are most welcome. We have discussed about the probability sampling techniques and non-probability sampling techniques, and you are going to get compulsory a question from probability sampling techniques and also question from non-probability sampling techniques. Whatever that we have discussed so far, you can also use those examples, or otherwise, if you know some more examples of your own, or otherwise, if your study material include any examples as such for the discussion of all these sampling techniques, you can also use those examples to answer those questions which are given in your examination paper. So this is very, very crucial. Sampling, what shall we say? Design. We can call it as sampling design. So sampling design is very, very important. So if the sample is very good, then the errors would also be very less. The higher the sample, the lesser the sampling errors. This error means if there is a gap between the population mean and the sampling mean, that is known as, that variation or variance is known as sampling error. So you have to calculate the population mean, and at the same time you have to calculate the sample mean, and if there is any difference, that difference is known as sampling error. Error between the population mean and the sampling mean. So for that, to avoid this kind of error, what we have to do is, we have to increase the sample. The higher the sample, the lesser the errors. This is the principle that you have to follow. And if you take up If we consider the collection of the data from each and every participant, there would not be error at all. Even then, there would also be error. If the researcher is not good, he doesn't have stuff. If he doesn't have stuff, there would also be error, isn't it?
That's right.
So therefore, error is, of course, important factor when we talk about sampling techniques. And my dear friends, anything that you want to ask me, you are most welcome. There's about only 1 minute to go for closure of this particular session. And we'll be meeting in the next class with some other topic. So
Thank
far,
you.
we have completed
Sir,
15 units.
sir, uh, notes send the chat box.
Ajay?
Can you send the notes chat
No,
box?
I'm sorry. It's not my duty how to prepare the notes. I cannot give the banana to you. I may give the banana to you, but I cannot remove the skin and give it to you, that banana.
Okay, okay, sir.
That's not good,
Ah,
you know. Hello, madam. What is your name?
Sridevi, sir.
Sri, you asked that question?
No, not that, sir. We have not yet received books, sir. Because of that, if we get the
Hello,
notes,
it's not,
that
no,
would be
you
a little
have to
bit
prepare.
helpful.
You just forget about the books and other things, not necessary. What is very important thing is, you have the syllabi and the internet is there. The material is available in the internet. Don't depend on the study material that is supplied by the institution. What I do is, I go into the net and then collect the data and then put it on my own, then I explain. That's what the strategy that I am following. Similarly, if the notes, no, nothing such. If you prepare the notes on your own, that would be better. You cannot forget at all. Please prepare the notes on your own. That will be better for you. You cannot
Okay, thank
forget
you,
also.
sir.
You
Thank
can
you,
sir.
sir.
forget
Thank
also.
you.
Normally, if I give the notes, if you prepare means you cannot forget.
That's correct,
Okay.
Okay,
sir. Okay, sir.
okay, sir.
Anyway,
I
it's all right. If the material is not available, please go to the internet. Our material is available. You can prepare the notes and then go for the examination. That's all about for today's. And this is
okay,
Dr. Reddy signing off for today's session.
okay, thank you, sir.
Welcome, welcome. Anybody thanking me?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Abu, Kalyani, Subhashini. How many people are there totally?
14, sir.
Only
All,
14.
only 14 participants, sir.
Yes, sir.
Why is it like this? What is happening with those people, 400 members? Yesterday we were about only 10, today is about 14. Huh?
Starting
A few people.
22 members, sir.
They left.
Now 14 members.
Today there is
Now
a cricket
14.
match between New Zealand and India. Even though that's not that much important, they may be watching the TVs.
Now 14 members.
Oh. That's all. See you for the next class. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
sir.
That's
Thank you,
all.
sir.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much,
very
sir.
much, sir.
Welcome, welcome,
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
welcome.
Thank you, sir. Myself, Sudhakar here. Thank you very much.
Wow, Sudhakar. Thank you, Sudhakar ji.
It was very good, sir. Fantastic.
Am I right, sir? Am I effective?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because you are the judge.
No, no, no. We are just
No, 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 no.
sharing our
Act- no,
expressions,
no,
and
no. What
it
is
was wonderful.
actually happening is
Yes, sir.
the data will be collected from the students in order to understand the effectiveness of the teachers in other
Yes, sir.
countries.
Yes, sir.
They will be acting as judges to decide the effectiveness of a teacher.
Correct, correct, sir.
Based on the feedback from the students, they will recruit the teachers in other countries.
Yes, yes,
So
sir.
therefore, you are the judges and you will come under purposive sampling or judgmental sampling also.
Definitely, definitely.
Thank you, Sudhakarji.
It will be a 5-star score, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you
Right,
tomorrow
sir.
next.
Thank you, sir.
Please, please,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.